recording has started.
Including this morning. So I'll talk a bit about this morning. So this is a strange format for a meeting. I know we've had many strange formats in the last year. This one's even a little different. I haven't done one quite like this, but what we wanted to do is try to spread out the time constraints, I guess, by having 2 question and answer sessions in response to the recorded presentations. So hopefully people had time to review some, if not all, of the recordings. I did review all. I believe I might have missed one that came in late. But really, I found the quality amazing, the breadth amazing, and the amount of interaction between teams already. And then I see so many opportunities for even further collaboration. That I guess that's why we're here today. So that was very good. How we'll work it today, or at least the way it worked this morning, was that this is really about the question and answers. It's notionally an hour. We can go over time if people have the energy and the desire. No problem there. I sent out the question sheet. I have received answers to several already, which is great. What we want to do is just go through this list with people that are in the meeting that provided presentations, identify questions, and we can ask them now. As well, please feel free to use the chat to add any other questions or to just verbally use the chat. We're a meeting of 12, so that's pretty easy. We can be relatively informal, so feel free to speak up at any point. So I appreciate all the contributions and the questions. What we're going to do with the questions after today's meeting tomorrow, I will update the question and answer sheet with all the answers that have come in, as well as any new questions that have been posed. I'll send it back out again tomorrow, and I'll ask all the presenters to provide concise answers to the questions that have been associated with you in that document, and asking for responses by the end of next week, so we won't push it too hard. But it'd be good to get that complete so that I think we're going to have a really good meeting record when this is done. Hopefully a lot of really good information. It's kind of a new way to do things, but I think we'll benefit in the long run since we can't actually have coffee together and mill about and meet for long periods of time these days. If you're not talking, it'd be good to mute, of course, just in case there's any background noise. See if I've got my process here, if I missed anything. Okay, I think that's it. So does that sound fine? Any objections? Okay, great. Want to welcome new people here to our group. We have Philip Lewis, we have Cassia, we have Nabil from Arab Organization of Agricultural Development. So our community continues to grow. This morning we had Adam Lewis from Digital Earth Africa. We had some really good discussion with him about their work and how it can benefit us, but also how we can support it. So that was good. So that is what these meetings are about. How can we enhance our cooperation, develop new partnerships and so on going forward, and get more from our efforts by working together than we would individually. So I'll move on to, so the way I did it this morning, I just worked through that question sheet, kind of one at a time, and pose questions where there are people in the meeting who are here. So the EAV working group, I guess that's Alyssa. She's not on the call, which is kind of understandable. I think it's an awkward time for her. So we'll get her response through a written response. Andy, we didn't have any questions about the capacity development working group, so that must have been very clear and concise and to the point, so congratulations there. We don't have Andy Davidson I believe he's on vacation. We have Pierre. Pierre, have you seen the questions for JCAM?
I have seen several questions about GCAM. I was expecting that Andy will be here.
Okay.
But I can. I have seen several questions about funding GCAM.
Yeah.
Recording is
This is what I remember from the question. I have to say that I don't have any answer. One of the questions was, how can we get organized to find some sort of funding for the GCAM network? This is what I remember from my Earth. Maybe can you tell me the question again?
Yeah, basically there's a comment about the importance and the success it's had. And it's a bit of a paradox that we are, even though we've had the success rate right at this point in time, we see kind of a lull in the funding for the JCAM work. So the question was, and it wasn't necessarily just to you and Andy, but really to the whole group, is given the current funding situation, how do we better attract sustained funding for network research? And I think there's some of the initiatives that we've seen presentations from, like CropWatch for GeoGlam and so on, and the your AVL, Agricultural Virtual Laboratory activity that's probably going to provide some infusion into JCAM, or invigoration, if you like. And the follow-up question to that was, is there a role that GeoGlam Secretariat, in particular I can play to help in this regard? Any comments on that from Pierre? Anybody, I guess?
Ian, I was looking for it's Chris. I was looking for the YouTube slide for JCAM. I didn't see that. Is there?
Was there?
Am I missing something?
Yeah, you are. So it was a good presentation, actually. Impressive work. It was sent out. It was the one presentation out of all of them that had technical problems, and we tried to fix it. We sent it multiple times through multiple platforms. The video plays if you have it installed on your desktop, but it didn't work. I couldn't load it into YouTube. So yesterday I sent out a link to the Dropbox folder that contains that presentation along with the PowerPoints.
Okay, thanks. I'll take a look.
So look for that. If you don't have it, let me know, and I'll resend it to everybody. So the JCAM presentation is there in there, unfortunately. It's not up with the others. But I must say the YouTube platform worked really well. That was the only issue I had, and I don't really know what I'm doing, so that tells you something. It's a pretty mature, workable technology, I guess.
But maybe
sorry. Oops.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. Is there a button to raise the hand? Because I cannot find it.
You can. I think there is, but you can also do chat.
Okay.
In the chat, you can raise.
Okay.
And we're now 16 people, so I think we can. It's not too many people. We're not going to be talking over each other too much. So if you're not getting, if you have something you want to contribute to the discussion and you're not getting my attention, please speak up.
Maybe just to reply to your question, Ian, about the GCAM support. In the past, it has been through a kind of network support thanks to two main projects, EU project and ESA project. And then in the second phase, it has been very much supported by the Canadian component related to the SAR. And then we got some specific support for the annual meeting, either from Canada or from Taiwan, which allow to have successful meeting. And we have to say that we have tried recently to get support through regular call, but I mean not dedicated for JCAM, but involving JCAM in some specific call, but it was not successful. And therefore, currently, as far as I know, there is only the AVL the Agriculture Virtual Lab, which has a very little money to get on board the GCAM partners, but this hopefully can be increased in the future.
Good. We'll probably talk a bit more about that. I think if I remember right, there's intent in the Crop Watch for GeoGlam initiative, which I think you're involved with, Pierre, as well, to support some of the JCAM work. But you probably can't speak to that right now. That's very new. Hongwei spoke to that this morning.
Ian, so as I see it, there are two parts to the funding issue. One is the sort of the GLUE initiative, cross-site initiative funding that Pierre's just talking about, which is really critical. But there's also the individual contribution from the JCAM sites, and that's kind of a different funding source, and level of effort is determined by those site managers. So seems like that we should be working both aspects at the moment, and not only just trying to get the GLUE money and for cross-site initiative, but also to strengthen the activities of the individual sites and the participation and contribution of individual sites, and look for opportunities for maybe bilateral site activities that are more manageable in terms of funding.
Yeah, and let's not forget the Canadian contribution for the website and the management of the kind of the administration, and Pierre's support as co-lead as well. But we started to take that for granted, but we shouldn't. I think it's
all right.
Pretty important.
Sorry.
Okay. Another question for JCAM. Based on outcomes from the calibration data study, do you envision a need to update the JCAM guideline documents? I guess another way of saying that, Pierre, do you see the guidelines as being living documents, and as we evolve our work, they shall to evolve?
We during our last annual meeting in June, which was a virtual one, we reviewed some aspect of the guidelines, which is not fully endorsed yet, but we make a big progress on this. But that's it, basically.
Okay.
Oh, this is still, guidelines are still a key topic for GCAM for sure.
Good. I think as the essential variables are developed, we'll see a need to develop more guidelines as well to help support that work. So, and the JCAM network could very well play an important role in that, I think.
And related to funding, in the previous meeting we had in November last year, we mentioned that it would be very relevant to find some funding for guidelines production. And the GCAM would be a good place where we can cross the let's say the global diversity of cropping system and situation to make sure that the guidelines are quite relevant. But we did not succeed to get that kind of funding.
Okay, and I see Agnes asked if we had looked at the lacuna funds for agriculture. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think we have, at least I'm not aware of if we have. Might be something we can follow up on. But first, we really have to get our in situ data house in order, I think, before we go out and start looking for funds to collect open data. We have to make sure our data is as open as we can make it accessible. And we're going to talk about that next week. Anything more on that? Okay, so the other two comments are really about the SAR into comparison, so I'll leave those for Andy respond to. That brings us, I'll say we had a good discussion around RAP and how we can link that to some of the other activities, World Food Program and so on, Digital Earth Africa. Really good discussion. That'll be in the proceedings when you get them or when we finish them. But moving on to agenda item 2, some of the contributing initiative updates. As I said, we have a new member, and Nabil from Arab Organization of Agricultural Development is here, and we have a couple questions with respect to the Knowledge Hub, and I'll acknowledge Nabil that he already provided written answers, but this is a good opportunity for you to speak to the group here and talk about this. In terms of your Knowledge Hub, what point in development is this now? And do you see any opportunities in collaborating with the GeoGlam portal on the Geo Knowledge Hub?
Yes, thank you, Ian, for this opportunity. Welcome, everyone. I'm happy to be with you for the first time. Thank you, Ian, for permitting AUAD to join us. Our Knowledge Hub is based on our new strategy at Arab Organization for Agricultural Development, which want to invest in knowledge, mainly to share information for public in agricultural sector. And one of main component of the Knowledge Hub is the Agricultural Geoportal. For us, we have no experience on such Knowledge Hub, on such platform, and we want to share with you your experience on that. I mean, we would like to have like a guideline how to build an agricultural geoportal using GeoGlam tools. I know GeoGlam data. If any guideline or we don't know how to do that. I mean, do we need, for example, to go to a private company to do this, or it's possible within GeoGlam community to do that? Really, I don't know. I'm remote sensing specialist, yes, but on such implementing a geoportal, I have no experience on that. I'm more thematic area in agro-meteorological aspects. So this is my my questions to you community. Thank you very much. Over.
That's great. That's really good because we're figuring out as we go as well, but we're doing it with the Geo Secretariat, who are investing a lot of effort into developing the infrastructure. So really our focus is on how we organize our knowledge and capture it and link it. So it might be a good opportunity for you to get on board with us and kind of leverage what's already happening there. And that also obviously gives you clear access to the knowledge that the community's developed already, or better immediate access. So sounds like a win-win as we go forward. I know portals must be important because everybody's building one, so I think the more we can do around coordinating this work, especially for Earth observation for agricultural monitoring, the better off we're going to be. Well, that's what I would say about that. Any other thoughts on that from anybody? No? Okay. Rogerio had to send his regrets. He has a meeting right now, but just before the meeting, he did send the answers to the questions. I noticed when I looked at the views, he had more views than anybody, so there's a lot of interest in what the World Food Program is doing, and it's unfortunate he's not here. We can congratulate him on his his award of the Nobel Peace Prize. You can't do that every day, but I guess we'll have to wait to another day. So moving on to Surad and Agnes, you mentioned the opportunity to build additional continuing collaboration within the network. JCAM is currently in a dry spell, as we've heard. What advice would you have to generate more support for the networks? Do you have any thoughts in that regard, Agnes?
No, I don't have the solution, in fact, and I think we discussed it just before. So my only thought is about, as I suggested, lacuna funds.
Yeah.
They had a call for tender in November. I think it was for Africa continent, and unfortunately we missed the deadline. So, but okay. I think it could be nice to have a look at this fund and see how we could collaborate with them.
Okay. Another thing that's evolved recently, and there's nothing in the presentations about it, but I think I mentioned it in mine, but we've been having some initial high-level talks with the World Economic Forum, and these are very, representatives of the UN agencies, funding governments, as well as recipient governments, and a lot of corporate involvement. They're looking for public-private partnerships, building digital commerce, and a lot of that is about de-risking. And that's where I think we could play is in providing information like our techniques, co-development of prop monitors. Some of the work we started to do with Swiss Re and Andy at ITC has done in Ethiopia with production insurance for smallholders. This would be a very interesting aspect for them. So that, and there'd be a whole research aspect to that. And they're looking at a major initiative for the Sahel region, a large region, and there might be some opportunity there to generate some additional support for right across the entire program. And I think Andy and or I are going to bring it up in our meeting next week on the 20th, what we want to do to start to get ready for that opportunity if it comes. And so I'll just leave it at that unless Andy wants to say anything further on that.
No, Ian, let's keep that for the 20th.
Okay, good. Don't want to spill all the beans. Okay, we'll move on then. Sven couldn't make it. He sent his regrets as well. And they're very active. They're doing a lot of platform work as well as the World Serial and World Cover work, which is quite important, but we'll wait for him to respond in written form. I had a good chat this morning with Sophie about Send2Agri, and I'll characterize what she said here, and if you want to add anything, we can go ahead. Otherwise, we can just move on. But basically, the question was regarding the medium to longer term sustainability of the Send2Agri toolbox and systems. It's been incredibly successful. This summer we held Send2Agri Amazon Click and Go session at the Geo Symposium, and that session received twice as many views, I think, than any other session that whole week. So it shows there's a lot of interest out there. So there's a need to sustain it. When I talked to Sophie about it, she said the AVL is what you see as the home to Send2Agri, and I think that's what a 3-year program to begin with. But the intention is for it to be sustained in the long term. Do you want to comment on that, Pierre?
This is fully right, that the AVL is really the way that ESA found to sustain a minimum maintenance of the tools that have been developed.
Recording is on.
And the tools are not only Send2Agri, but this is Send2Agri, Send4Caps, and for Stat and SendET, and maybe others to come. And therefore, this is a way that ESA found to maintain, from an IT perspective, the tools and to make it available to the community on a platform. But this does not mean that we found a way to make this evolving.
Right. It's just maintenance, basically.
Yeah. Therefore, up to now, we can manage to evolve through the Send4Cap and Send4Stat, but this is only 2 years to go.
Okay. Then that leads into the Agricultural Virtual Laboratory project. Is there anything you want to say on that right now, Pierre?
But maybe, Sophie, you want to say something? Yes, Sophie.
I already commented it in the morning. No, I think that
I could repeat it and see if I get it right.
yeah, I can repeat it. No, I think this is you've told the most important thing. This is a 3-year project, but this is there for long term. So this is a very good thing. This is really R&D. So this is a laboratory. This is for researchers. So this is not really that any stakeholders will find it useful. What is useful for all stakeholders is that tools are maintained, sustained, but this is more for stakeholders. And one key question, but this is an open question, both for GeoGlam and GCAM, is the ambition of the AVL is to really provide access to a wide variety of data sets, EO data, but also in situ data. And so for the moment, we are at the really user requirement phase where we will identify all the data sets that are of interest, and then that can be shared. And we know that for the in situ data, this is a very big challenge. We hope that we can foster collaboration between scientists, and that if the scientists share the data between themselves, it will make it easier. But that will remain really on an individual basis, and on this aspect, clearly GeoGlam could support and could help in this big push to share in situ data, to find an incentive or to find a dynamic. This very access to the data is another key aspect of AVL, which probably can be related to GeoGlam.
Yeah, maybe it's good that I don't know how much you have seen what is AVL, but AVL is the ambition of ESA to offer to any scientist who wants to develop agriculture application related to remote sensing, to give them the appropriate environment in terms of cloud processing, in terms of access to EO data and access to in situ data. And therefore, this would be a playground for scientists. This is very much linked then to GCAM. I mean, as a potential, let's say, partnership. But anybody is more than welcome, and this is fully open.
Any follow-up questions from anybody on that?
If I can ask something, I can't see their hand either. But will you build for this EVRL the platform, or is it going to be on Dias or on another platform for sharing the data? How it's going to be organized?
No, it won't be another platform sharing data. It will be a small Google Earth engine dedicated to agriculture, which will be a place where you own your code and you can share them, but basically there will be no company to take your code away.
Good.
It will be open for scientists?
Fully open.
This
is, I mean, the setup is three IT companies, and basically we are the one making the link with the agriculture community. Therefore, this is an IT solution for long term. ESA insists a lot.
Okay. Anything else before we move on? Nothing. So Just a quick comment on Digital Earth Africa, and Sophie's the one person that was there. So if you see anything I missed in any of these, please speak up. Anyways, very good discussion with Adam Lewis. We've already engaged them. They're already involved to some extent in our essential variable work. They see the GeoGlam essential variables initially driving their cropland mask work, which is being developed now. And they're not using on-the-ground in situ data. They're using reference data from Earth Online. I think using high-resolution imagery, which may be okay for a crop mask, but we're not sure. We'll find out. They're quite keen on having our community drive the requirements, not just for crop mask, but presumably for other products as it matures. And we can help them with these requirements as well as the processes, best practices for best algorithms and that sort of thing. And it came up many times this morning, we're all very keen on doing a better job of managing what in situ data we can and making it more available and openly available as much as possible. So, and they would certainly benefit from that, and they're quite open to that. I've already got answers from Shinichi on the Asia rice questions, so I'll leave that. Crop watch for GeoGlam, I think I'll make a comment about this, even though I don't think anybody it's the middle of night there, so I'm sure none of them have joined us. This is really new. This is last week, I think, Monday, they announced the launch of Crop Watch for GeoGlam. It looks like it's an exciting, well-funded project. It's being led by Hong Wei, who is also a co-lead for the Capacity Development Working Group with Andy and Alyssa. Part of the work they want to do is help coordinate between groups in the capacity development. Their interest is in Africa. So there's going to be good possibility there to both support some JChem work, but also on the capacity development side to enhance some of the coordination between what they're doing with CropWatch and what other groups are doing. And ideally, we kind of discussed it a bit. I think the kind of a shared vision is that we would have a integrated, coordinated approach to capacity development, co-development activities, so that and Sophie talked to this as well quite well, so that we would be able to have a more integrated interface with our many clients on the delivery end, and not overcrowd them with continually coming with new requests for projects in their areas. That was a pretty lousy description, but there's a pretty good presentation you can look at if you haven't seen it already. Sophie, anything you would want to add after hearing Hong Wei speak to it?
No.
Okay. I hate when I do all the talking. That's usually a bad sign. Felix, I see you're here. We have a few ASAP questions. Yes, good.
Hello, Ian. Hello, everybody.
Hey, Felix. Question one is, how open are the three platforms? And are the algorithms you use in a box, or are they kind of accessible, explorable? Can you go to GitHub and get them, that sort of thing? And can you access data through the platforms?
Yes, thanks a lot, Ian, for the questions. And yeah, maybe before answering the questions directly, 2 words about the role of ASAP. It's becoming more and more a bit the second leg of the information that the Joint Research Center provides about agriculture, our core product, and the traditional product. The best known is the Mars Bulletin that every month informs about yield forecast and monitoring agriculture in Europe. And the ASAP is the complementary platform that does the same, but more in a food insecurity context for areas outside Europe. So we continue to develop it and to improve it, and we are very happy about the way it feeds into the GeoGlam products, mainly the crop monitor for early warning. So that's a very well established collaboration now that I'm quite proud of and like a lot. About the questions, I would say that everything is free and open to access, so everything is visible. There is no part which is restricted or not open. Of course, it's not the main objective is not to provide a data downloading platform, but more to make available information which is analyzed for the agricultural hotspots and which is about showing the indicators which are behind the analysis for the Warning Explorer. And then there's the high resolution part, which is about making accessible the Sentinel and Landsat imagery in an easy way, which is optimized for agricultural monitoring. So all of these three platforms are more for data information and data visualization and exploration, to some extent for analysis, but not for downloading. So I would say we make available what we can. The maps that are shown and the graphs can be downloaded, but in general, we don't work on making possible data download, because most of the input data can be downloaded from other platforms anyway. So I don't know, the chirps rainfall and its derived anomalies, they can be better downloaded from the original website managed by the group of Chris and colleagues. And the same for MODIS and DVI. So the only thing which is specific, or the derived indicators, such as the drought conditions warning, that can be downloaded. But what is not specific and what is comes from elsewhere doesn't make sense to download from ASAP. Yeah, that's it from my side. I don't know if Bettina is is not there, nor is Christophe Sagnier from Copernicus for GeoGlam, right?
Right.
So if there are we have questions for example, Copernicus for GeoGlam, which is an outsourced JRC contract outsourced to Sears. We invited Christophe, but I think he cannot be here. It's about producing crop type maps for a number of countries in Africa to support the national crop monitors. I think there was a question about contacts with the Digital Earth Africa.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, and
so I don't really I don't really know about whether there is already a link, but maybe what I propose, Ian, if you know who asked the question, or if it comes from you, maybe then if you can just provide a bit more details about what you think would be really useful that in the Copernicus for GeoGlam project we pick from or what exists already in the Digital Earth Africa. So that if you can give us a few more hints, I think that would be useful, because I'm aware about it, but I have not well understood where you see the potential contact points. So thanks for that.
Yeah,
and the question for Bettina I cannot answer, because that is about RTD, whether there's an opportunity for GeoGlam in the next RTD call. I have that we have to come back to Bettina personally.
Yeah, I think we need her advice. We haven't had much luck with RTD in the past but they come out with these calls that are supporting us, so we would like to have some a priori input if possible. On the Copernicus for GeoGlam, this is great. I hope everybody looks at the video or it's a wonderful new project. I'm sorry Christoph couldn't be here, but I'm hoping they're going to join our community. The question was really about trying to spur the linkage, knowing that they probably hadn't made the linkage to Digital Earth Africa, but the work they've done on ARD might be very valuable to save not just them, but many of our teams working in Africa effort. It's certainly worth looking at as well. Of course, the in situ data, where and when it can be shared, would be valuable to better coordinate that. Okay. So, any questions on that? I see we have something in chat. Oh, yes. Working in Macau. Andy, do you want to say something to that comment?
Oh, the crop watch for GeoGlam?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just looking at that nice program that's being set up, but just some concern about what's going on right now in Ethiopia because Mekelle is right in the middle of the conflict zone. I was just curious if they have some time lag there where they can patiently wait for things to become more settled so they can operate, or if they have to move to another test site. There's basically zero communication with Mekelle at the moment.
I know they're focused on Uganda first. It's kind of the low-hanging fruit, developing the case study or the proof of concept, I think is what you call it. Felix, any comment on that with regard to Ethiopia?
No, I don't understand well the question. I mean, this is for Crop Watch, right? Not for
Crop
Copernicus
Watch,
for GeoGlam, which is
yeah. Sorry, I'm off on a tangent. Never mind. I know Nabil pointed out in chat that they have representatives at 22 Ministry of Ags across the region, so certainly an opportunity to partner there. And Pierre asked about ARD. I don't think anybody's used it yet except for Digital Earth Africa. That's why I asked the question. I think we need to push that a bit and see if we use it and if it is valuable and useful. And they're bringing Landsat in as well as Sentinel data. So it's going to be and it's going to be continually updated. It's going to be quite a resource, and they're well supported. So it could very well be something that the community can build upon in these projects and benefit from. But we have to make that determination still. Okay. Send for stats. So Sophie, how has your engagement with the statistical offices gone? I imagine it's different in every country. And do you have any suggestions yet on best practices to build working relationships with the statistical stakeholder?
In fact, the engagement was rather smooth. It took a long time to decide which country would be selected as pilot, because the choice had to come from a steering committee, and I had to make proposition and to contact them and to engage them. So the first step was done by FAO and the World Bank, basically, not by us. And then also the final decision was for them. And so countries were basically very interested. Our requirements in terms of data were quite high, and so there were countries interested in joining the project, but they did not have the right data set. But interest is there for sure. So I think that this is a very good point. Then on the data in itself, sharing data and having the right data to be able to do a nice and new job, this remains really a challenge. Even if in the pilot countries that we have, some countries do not have the right data, so we will have to rely on local initiative from the World Bank or from FAO to get data, but not at national scale. This is still a challenge for two countries, Malawi and Tanzania. We are really in a difficult position to get useful data.
So in situ data is an issue always, I guess. On the computing side, you mentioned some concerns from some countries on sharing their data within a cloud-based computing service. And I know you're working on machine-to-machine protocols. Can you make any comment on this? I'm really interested in the progress there.
This is interesting, but this is also a question. So this was a requirement from ESA that we worked on a machine-to-machine protocol because there is an institutional request from FAO, from World Bank to facilitate the access to statistical data set. But the countries we have engaged in the project do not request that. So they have absolutely no problem to share the data with us, only by signing a form saying that we will keep the data for R&D purposes and this kind of just agreement, bilateral agreement. And so we do not have a clear request that what we have to develop. So far we have identified ways of doing that, so to connect to the machine or to make some part of the job locally and not on the cloud. So we have different options, but as we have no user asking for that, except we know that it might be useful, it is difficult to design something very precise. So at the Geo meeting we had I don't know, maybe it was at the ESA EO for agriculture. I was in touch with Sudan, the Ministry of Agriculture in Sudan, and they told us that they would need this kind of protocol to be authorized to work on the cloud. But this is the only country I have heard so far which is requesting that.
Okay.
But maybe you have other experience on that. I mean, if you have more information of what would be needed for countries who are afraid or who are not authorized to work on the cloud, we would be really interesting. There are many projects working worldwide, so maybe you know some countries that could help us fine-tuning the specifications of what we need to develop.
Canada,
great.
absolutely. Would be interested because they get their field information shared with them, but it's very protected. But it could be, if we could find a way to create useful CalVal data sets from that, but yet protecting the confidentiality of the landholders and so on. That would be an incredible asset and open up that data countrywide. So about half the country we have good access to the in situ because the Canadians, the Agriculture Ministry collects it, and the other half it's collected by the insurance agencies. So yeah, anyways, that's one. And it would be probably really interesting to work in Africa on this, though, because that's where the biggest challenges are. With the data, in situ data that is shared in that project that you have agreements with, do you think they would be open to sharing it broader, either within season or, say, older data, just as sample data sets?
Within season, the answer is really clear. At this stage, this is a no. This is really difficult. We only have access to past data, even with an agreement, etc., etc. So we do not have the current data. And if we collect data funded by the project, that might become different because we become co-owner of the data. but sharing data from the current season that they are collecting and from which they will derive the statistics, I think that at this moment that will be very difficult.
Something we have to build to. Okay. The next was a comment just noting that there's countries like Uganda where there's multiple activities going on at the same time, collecting similar and sometimes the same types of information or developing the same kinds of information. And the question was really focused on, is there interest in the community to look at an intercomparison of the results and the methods to come up perhaps with best practices? I'm wondering if, and you're the only, I think Adam's not here, EOStat can speak to that as well. But Sven isn't here for World Serial, but I'm just curious to see if there's interest to follow up on something like that. It'd be quite valuable, I think. No comment. Okay, I'll just leave that out there. One of the issues we have, of course, when we have multiple products being generated by our community, by different teams, we want to make sure that they're not conflicting. And if we could come up with best practices, that would help deconflict perhaps and come up with better results in some of these cases. So it'd be interesting to take advantage of areas where we are doing a lot of work and see if we can do some intercomparisons.
And I'll just maybe speak up and say that I think that is an important comment, and I think that's part of what GeoGlam is about and what we're trying to do. And so I think if we do have overlap in areas, whether it is that we can work on the methods side or on the contact side or on the ground data side, and then intercomparison, I think is very much in line with what we're trying to do. So, and I think you have identified, and I think there are now starting to be countries where we're interacting on, or similar countries where it's also worthwhile looking at intercomparison of methods and as well. So.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I had for people that are on the call. So, and we're planning for an hour, so we have a bit of time, or we can go over time if we want. Is there anything further we want to discuss? Any additional questions, either now or send them in, and I'll add them to the document.
So, Ian, I made a comment to you. I don't know if we're going to bring it up next week, but it seems to me that there's with the increasing attention to agriculture monitoring, we're getting into a proliferation of projects that are going to be generating similar products for the same countries, same regions, same areas. And I'm very much concerned that we've got a problem about trying to maintain the quality of the products. So given the cloud computing capability and the data on Google Earth Engine, it's possible for anybody now, graduate students, anybody, to generate products. The question is, how good are these products? And what concerns me is that if we have 4 or 5 products for a given country, say it's Uganda or Tanzania or any of the regions we've been hearing about, and people are going to the governments and saying, here you go, here's the best product, that they're going to be confused as to what the quality of the products are. So it seems to me that we could set up some sort of forum for intercomparison, and that leads us to the idea that you were pushing before about best practices. And we talked about actually funding some of that if there was money in the Secretariat for getting some write-ups done on best practices, because we were dropping behind on that. But it seems to me that we really need to be careful now, because we've got projects within GeoGlam or part of GeoGlam that are kind of doing the same thing, and we should have some, at least within our program, have coordination. And then there's groups outside of GeoGlam that are also doing. So I'm just think we need to try to manage in some way this, very positive thing that now it's possible for people to do this, but we don't have a community structure in place to do quality control, and we can't rely on peer-reviewed journals anymore in the way that we used to for a number of reasons. So these are data sets, and I think we need something. So that's a topic area that we could bring up for discussion at another time, but it's just something I wanted to raise.
Okay, so I think that would be a good topic to add on next week if we have time. There'll be a lot of interest. We've discussed endorsing products and that sort of thing in the past, but I think it's more fundamental than that, and actually looking at the
and I think Philip's making the point that the more we make in situ data available, and the more we exacerbate that problem. That's not to say that people should not make data available, but it's just going to make it even easier. And there's, having sat through a review panel recently, there were probably 20 proposals to use machine learning for producing products, but a real absence of in situ data. And there's not a lot of interest in the accuracy assessment of those products either. And so we're being pinched at both sides. It's easy to generate. The data to really do a good job, not available. If we make that available, then there's no system for quality control in place, and we don't have attention to accuracy assessment. I think agencies are now, even NASA is starting to. I got an email this week saying they're going to put out products totally unvalidated. So we got a problem, I think, that the community needs to step up to.
Good, I agree, and that speaks to the in situ data issue as well that we're going to be talking about. I think the in situ and rigorous CalVal is the last major hurdle that we have to overcome before there's fully widespread use of Earth observation for agricultural monitoring, because we have the computing, we have the open data, we have many of the algorithms, but we're quite light on good in situ data sets. So,
but it's also the accuracy assessment, it's both. And I think that's something that needs some attention, really. So I don't know what we do. I mean, the more in situ data that's made available, the easier it is, as Phil says, for people to produce products. But anyway, I made the point.
Okay, it's a Thuy speaking. Yeah. I agree with Chris. We had the problem in Asia, for example. When you go to countries, the people say, why your product is different from the other product, and etc. And all the products have very good statistical validation using a set of in situ data. But when you compare the product, there are disparities. And so the people in the countries, they prefer to learn how to use it and do it themselves because they know what they need, etc. It's the case of Taiwan or the case of Vietnam. And because the more we produce the product with different sources, different sensors, etc., the more we show the disparities. And then for the user, it's confusing. So how to do it with how do we agree with a set of accuracy assessment with to put the raw data together? I don't know. I don't know. We have to find out a protocol which link with what the user wants. Because you can find two maps with excellent statistical validation, but they are different. It's the same for forest. Okay. So we have to think about how to give the confidence in the users. Okay.
Yeah, good.
Yes, I agree completely. We have some experience in this, so we recognize the problem. We don't really have a solution, but it seems like a community coordinated effort by GeoGlam could help that. And I mean, you can talk about best practices. The CIOS has the land product validation protocols. I think as part of the discussion with EAVs, we've been talking about validation protocols. But that needs quite a bit more work than I think we are where we are now. But just a thought.
This is Alyssa. Sorry, I arrived late. Under the EAV activity, that is something that we have talked about within the framework that Pierre put forth to evaluate like kind of where we have gaps. And I imagine that a lot of it would be in the validation front. We talked about meeting with the LPV and kind of working through that avenue, but I think it comes down to the level of ability of people to dedicate the time to work on something like that. And I don't know if that's a community effort. The other thing is the EAVs themselves have, as a part of their characterization, an accuracy target for a lot of variables that was totally left blank. But I think at the very least, we should just say for something to be an EAV, it needs to have error uncertainty quantified with it. Even if we don't set like a target amount, just that it's done and it's quantified and people can utilize that as they please.
Good.
Hello, Jan. Can I comment something?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Sorry. Yes. Hello. How are you? Related to this thing you are discussing, I think in part it's good to have, for example, two products for the same country. For example, in part it's good because we can see the discrepancies on the maps and see also the agreement, so we can see perhaps regions where both maps agree and the result is more robust. And there's perhaps in some places you have several products with different, for example, different behavior of the crop type maps, and you can find the difference and see that the regions are more problematic, and you need to study more or to improve the methodologies there. I think at least for Argentina, we are also working, for example, in national crop type maps. We think that it's not completely solved, the generation of the map. So we have quite good accuracy in some places, but not in all the places, not in all the crops. So the general comment is that in part it's good that to have several several products over one country. So I think it's not solved this. In relation to the in situ data, I think for crop type maps, for example, you can't use visual interpretation. For example, like for example for land use maps, you can validate with visual interpretation using Google Earth or things like that. But for crop type maps, you need local information of each crop. So it's impossible to from images to be sure that you have maize or soybean or using Google Earth. So it's also a very relevant question to see how to validate and how to validate several products, no, in one country, and how to say this is better than the other.
So Diego, let me comment. I think you're absolutely right, but you're talking from a point of view as a researcher, okay? And what we find is that when you're working with the ministries that are trying to use this data, they don't have necessarily the people or the infrastructure to do the research, to do the legwork, to figure out what's working where and what's not working where. They basically want to use the product. So I agree with you, but I think there's a step there which needs to be addressed, and I think we're talking about roughly the same thing.
Okay, I agree, Chris. But for example, if you want to validate different products or to see which is better quality, how can you do this? How to get in situ data to validate the information? the situ data also provide from local people. So perhaps some of the situ data is of good quality, some of the situ data is not of good quality. So I think we need to think about this, how to validate, how to generate an index, for example, of the quality of the map, so the ministries or people who are using the map can see, oh, this map is better or than the other.
Okay, so clearly this is an area that we want to explore. I think we all realize it's an issue. We all know the problem, but we don't know the solutions. So this would be great to bring up next week, I think, if we can get enough interest, perhaps we could create I dare I say it, a working group to follow up on this. Chris, is this something you'd feel happy bringing forward at the meeting?
Yeah, I think it's a general point. I don't have a solution. I mean, I was going to say that in the past, the way that LPV was able to get going was that we had some people who were actively involved in the accuracy assessment themselves and were sufficiently funded to be able to volunteer their time and energy to develop sort of draft community documents for circulation and form a small group. But at the moment, as I see it, there's less and less support for accuracy assessment because it's expensive and it's not easy. And I think it's we're seeing the funding go towards generating products rather than generating a quality controlled accuracy assessed product. So, and there's a lot of hand waving about using fine resolution data to validate coarse resolution data and moderate resolution data. So I think it's really we need a group of people who are working this, who are willing to come together. I think it speaks to Alyssa's point really. But again, LPV is a sort of a voluntary effort, but I think raising it to the space agencies as a major concern, I think that's something that we could seriously do, and then see if we can build up enough of an interest in funding to support this kind of stuff. But we have some projects Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Chris. No, sorry. I was just going to emphasize your point about bringing it up to the space agencies and say what we've done with CIOS so far, but please finish. I think you're muted.
Sorry, we do have some projects going through the YouTubes that have included in their accuracy assessments. So maybe we could, if there's enough energy and enthusiasm, we could pull together a small group that are doing this. I know that it's very much in the mind of people that are concerned about producing quality products rather than producing products. So we could harness that energy.
Okay, but the best thing is that the user will tell us why they don't use our products. Like we need the ministry people who evaluate our products and then say why they don't use it, why it's different from what they expect. Sometimes it's a small thing, but we did not understand. Because the problem is until now we were working for publications, and now if we want that the user use our products every day, every month, and this is another story. And I think that it's we have to spend some time to go towards the users.
So I was just going to say that thus far we have, in front of the space agencies, been sort of showing the EAVs as something that's coming, and we've given previews of progress along the way and kind of how it will impact CIOS and the ways in which they can utilize it. And we have had some preliminary conversations with WG CalVal, under which the land product validation group sits, and they have said, at least in theory, like, this is our mandate to work on this kind of thing. So I think there's the possibility for us to bring that up in a more concerted way with the top priority products that we have.
the top 9 EAVs or whatever and say, this is where we should really make sure that we're working on this kind of stuff. And the other comment that I was going to make is that we've been talking with NASA RSET, which is one of the capacity development webinar kind of public record channels, about doing a series on STAR for agriculture. And we would include at least a quarter of that course would be on error assessment. And so I think that the more we put it forth as the standard and say, like, this is a necessary part, like most of those trainings that have come out today, they kind of just end at the product. And so I think if we just continue and we do have trainings or when we talk about projects that are successful, we really emphasize the validation portion, that will go a long way toward kind of influencing the culture of product generation to always include an accuracy assessment with it.
Is Heather involved with that discussion at all?
Intimately. Yeah, she's the primary instructor. Yep.
Good. Okay. So I think we've gone deep on this one. I think it'd be good to bring it back next week, really not talking about the issue itself so much as how we should go about starting to look at addressing it. Perhaps creating a working group or whatever. So maybe if Chris can bring that forward and the rest of us with an interest can contribute, that'd be a great way to move forward on that one. We should move on. Any other questions? Maybe Alyssa, since you're here, before we dial out, there was one question. Do you want to answer that in written form, or do you want to speak to it now regarding?
I can speak to it. I mean, I in written form, I just responded to you. I didn't know that we were supposed to embed it in the document, but I can do that later. I mean, the answer is, and for those of you who were able to watch the presentation that I put together on the EAVs, I mean, it's highlighted in red on the last slide. Is this something that we're capable of doing? Because the EAVs have been a really challenging effort. We're a year out of our meeting in Belgium, which I think was really enthusiastic and pushed us forward quite a bit. And when we do get together, we make good progress. I think the challenge is just that finding people's time in order to continue to push these efforts forward is really what's needed. I mean, Ben and I are kind of shepherding the process and doing the work of making sure the definitions make sense, making sure they're consistent, bringing what expertise we do have to the individual variables to kind of suss out definitions. But there's only so much that Sven and I can do on it. It really, to be a community consensus framework and set of variables that we're articulating as priorities, there really has to be kind of full community buy-in. And so, I put forth this timeline of finishing in the new year around March. But that's completely notional, and it's contingent upon people individually saying when and whether they're able to dedicate some time to undertaking the gap evaluation framework for the variables for which they are stewards. It's just like it's literally completely contingent upon me. There's no, or on that. There's Ben and I can't do that work.
Yeah. Well, I think the EAV work it's mission critical for GeoGlam as we look to the future and how we're going to contribute as we go, and it needs to be done right. It's been a tough year. I think there's been remarkable progress made, but we need a plan that allows everybody to contribute to and make sure that we buy into the timelines and people are actually going to contribute the time required to get where we need. If we have to move it out 3-6 months or whatever, that's fine. The most important thing is we do it together as a community. We have consensus and we have a good document, a set of documents and concept at the end, because that's going to drive our research agenda. It's going to drive a lot of the operational tools we develop in the future and how we link those to the big policy drivers like SDGs and climate change and so on. So it's really important. we definitely
Well,
don't
in
want
this
to
whole
rush it.
conversation we just had about validation too. I mean, it's the priorities that shake out of it and the gaps that we identify is also going to inform the ask that we make of the space agencies. Or it looks like we may take up an internal working group on the activity, but it seems like a perfect example of working with a group that already has pretty good validation infrastructure and documentation and kind of the history of developing that stuff in hand. So working with LPV does make sense.
Okay.
But we have, I mean, ultimately as the thematic experts, we have to push it across the line and have to continue.
I mean, I think, Alyssa, you're right. I think, if we want to put it in the framework of LPV, which makes sense for the space agencies, there is nobody funded in LPV to do this work apart from us. So that's, I mean, I think, to be honest, Ian, what we've got to do is get some commitments firmed up. So it might be good to revisit who's agreed, who's on the hook to do what the schedule is, and then for the Secretariat to help sort of coerce that activity to happen in a reasonable time frame. Because I think one of the things that we're all seeing under COVID is that everyone is just flat out on their day job, and there's not a lot of capacity for the volunteer stuff that's really important, and it's not funded. So I would say that we probably need to try be a bit more prescriptive about who's agreed to do what and what time frame.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. We need to have a little more rigorous plan with timelines, and I'm willing to help as well. I think it has been Melissa and Sven carrying a lot of the baggage here, but there has been a lot of engagement from other people from time to time. It just hasn't been sustained for whatever reason. So I think if we can,
that's it. I mean, maybe we organize another, because I feel like the meeting in Belgium was so successful. And then the sprints that we had in June, I felt like were very successful as well. We got a lot of stuff done for that. And I think the discussions that we had on the call, people were well prepared for them and they were really fruitful. But we haven't had, I mean, summer is always like a bit of a mess, and then throw a pandemic in there. I think that there's just like a natural kind of break that happened. And so maybe we look forward to, in January, having another kind of renewed sprint, so to speak, but this time around the framework. And Sven and I can put some thought into how that would be best be organized. I think the meetings in June worked well in terms of what we asked people to prepare and what they brought to them, because I think we got close to the answers that we needed and for most of the variables, and there were some that were not resolved, and that's kind of still where we sit today. So there's kind of the step of finishing those variables, mapping and water variables, and Ben already reached out to me on the water stuff, so thank you for that, Ben. And then there's the gap framework, which I think Pierre, having proposed the framework, perhaps Pierre, Sven, and I think a little bit about how we would pose that as a question to people to think through it and start to answer it, and what we want the answers to look like in terms of their level of detail and whatnot. So maybe that's an action that we take if Pierre agrees. Sven's not here, so I'll sign him up for it. But if Pierre's willing, maybe in January we find a time to meet for maybe 2 hours and think through how we would want to have people prepare to have another sprint around the gap evaluation framework.
Please involve me as well in that. Good.
I'm not quite sure how you link the EAV and the gap framework, but I trust you.
Well, I see the gap framework as done per product.
Yeah.
And then we find what's missing in terms of like what would we need to do to be able to generate these products, like to move beyond the definition, actually have products in hand, and what's the limitation? Because in some cases the definitions that we set forth are limited by current image acquisitions. In some cases maybe the missions aren't even flying. In other cases, it's going to be a computational or a capacity issue. I mean, that's how I'm interpreting the framework, is that there's sort of 8 different categories of things that need to be in place in order for products to be generated well, and then there's kind of sub things for 8 of those different categories,
and then we can assess like really where the weak spots are. And if it's, a capacity issue, then that's something that informs the capacity development group. If it's an acquisition or a data, availability issue, that's something that informs our feedback to CEOS specifically. If it's a methods issue, that feeds into the research agenda. If it's a computational issue, then that feeds into some of the ICT work that we're doing. And so it just kind of guides us what needs to be done for each of the variables in order to push things across the finish line to actually have these products available with error assessment alongside.
Okay, I got your point. Therefore, this is more a roadmap to achieve the EAV than the definition of EAV.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we're very close on the definitions of EAVs. We're very close. What remains for like the big picture of implementing the EAVs, like the first step is obviously the characterization and the definition, and that's where we've been sort of stuck. The next step is determining what we need to do to get there. And then simultaneously, we also have to come up with, and I think this part will be easy, but come up with a community consensus about how we decide whether a product generated meets the EAV standard or not. And how we go about like endorsing, so to speak, products that come out and say this meets the criteria or not. I'm less concerned about that part, which is why we don't talk about it very much. But yes, it's a roadmap. It's absolutely what it is. It's a framework that informs a roadmap to getting there, getting to the implementation of them.
Okay, that was good. We have a way forward on that. So we're a fair bit over time now. I don't want to keep people lingering on too much longer unless there's other questions. Of course, I'm here to stay as long as you guys want to talk, but is there anything further? Yep.
So are we moving into the any other business portion of the meeting?
That wasn't on the agenda today. That we were just handling questions and answers, but we actually ranged far enough that I think we can entertain another item if you want to bring it forward.
Well, it was just, and these are conversations that Inbal and Chris and I have been having a lot in the context of harvest, but in the context of GeoGlam, I think it's equally relevant, which is I get a lot of contacts from the sort of disasters community, either through Geo or through NASA, when something happens, asking, can you take a look at this and tell us what's happening? So an example is this week I got contacted to map inundation in a couple of countries in Central America following Hurricane Eta. And so I don't know how to do inundation mapping myself, so then I was kind of trying to reach out to people I knew who did do it. And I was thinking, it would really be good for GeoGlam to have some sort of rapid response function or listserv or working group or something, and have fundraising that goes along with it that sits in the Secretariat to enable us to put the expertise we have in our community to work to respond to disasters and emergencies for which our expertise can support. So it's just the thought about the question is really how do we leverage our network and mobilize our network of actors to be really helpful in times of extreme need, where the clock is ticking.
I know the CEOS community has a disaster approach with the space agencies. Are you familiar with how they do it? No.
I'm not. And I know how NASA does it, and it's extremely, they rather than being they don't have like a proactive framework in place. They've left their entire budget intact so that they can respond as needed.
Okay.
So they have no solicitations. They don't build up like long, and all kinds of discussions could be had about that. And I'm not suggesting that that's what we do here, but that's essentially how they're able to operate, is they always have cash available to do things like this. And so I wonder if this could be something in the Geo world, that there could be like a sub-trust fund for very rapid response. mobilization to do large-scale mapping efforts in a very quick turnaround.
So administratively, I think that'd be very easy in the WMO Trust Fund with GEO, with the GeoGLAM Secretariat. That's probably not an issue. It's the rest of it, which would be a challenge to put together, but certainly doable, starting with the funding. If the funding's there, I'm sure the interest will be there to put together a rapid response process that we could activate as required, and then look to the trust fund to provide the resources. We just have to find a source for the resources. What?
Is it Thuy speaking? I have a question related to the large-scale mapping, and we did the GeoRise for 5 countries, and it is a demonstration project. So now we demonstrate that it's possible. It's depending on the user in country who tell that it's good or not. But in case it's useful. So how to sustain that? Because the effort is really very big. Not a single laboratory or a small infrastructure can do that. And what are the interests of the community? For example, a global rice watch or global wheat watch, etc. Is it anything that in the future could be thought of in order to sustain such kind of findings, in order that the people can make use of that globally?
It is also, if I may add some question about validation. I know that there are fields for validation within some projects, ESA project or other European projects, but the system for validation, the models that have been used by chain of GeoGLAM, it will be good to set such validation fields. That GECAM, in fact, is one of it, but to have access for validation, the procedures, and not only scientific, but also for some kind of disasters in agriculture, and so on and so on.
Okay, so there'll be a discussion paper coming out tomorrow in support of our discussion on in situ data next week, and that talks to some of the things you're bringing up for sure. So take a look at that, and I hope you can make it to our discussion on the 20th. We'll be looking at this a little more and talking about whether this is something we want to take on as a community. And from all the discussion we've had, it's clear it is, I think. And then talk about how we do that through a working group or whatever. And I'll be suggesting some actions that we can bat around to get the discussion started off. I think it's key, especially if we're going to develop a GeoGLAM portal and the Geo Knowledge Hub. It'd be nice to have some sample in situ data sets that we can make openly available to start with, and then look at the longer term picture, how we build towards more sharing overall. Anyways, that's for next week. And I see Felix included a link to the Copernicus mapping, emergency mapping. I'll make sure I include that in the meeting document when we finalize that.
Yeah, it was just to say that not to duplicate that, because that is a mechanism that exists and which is very well working and is very efficient and rapid. So something to look at when you decide to do mapping. That's already there.
That's good.
Okay.
Good. Okay, we're about half an hour over time. Anything else? This has been good, interesting. You never know where these conversations go. So tomorrow I'll be sending out discussion papers And I'll be sending out revised questions. If you have any additional questions, send them to me between now and I'll say noon or so tomorrow, and I'll make sure they're in this document. It'll go back out to everybody, and I'll ask the presenters, the people that have presentations that have questions, to provide concise written responses in the document and send it back to me by the end of next week. I'll have the instructions in the email anyways. And then, of course, the discussion papers will support our interesting interactive discussion session. If you have any other new items additional to what we've discussed already, be prepared to bring them forward. Right now, we're going to talk about the in situ for sure. I'm going to update on the Knowledge Hub, the GeoGlam portal, and the last one is the UNFCCC support for the global stocktake, nationally determined contributions, and this is all coming through the CIOS roadmap activity for AFOLU. I'll update on that, and we can talk about where we go with that. So that's next week, and then yeah, that's it. Any questions on the process going forward? Are we all good for today? Silent. Okay. Oh, Alyssa?
No, I was giving a thumbs up. All good.
Oh, good. Excellent. So thanks again for all the presentations. They were excellent. This is the best set of presentations we've had, interesting enough. Maybe we're all getting good at this with all the experience we've had over the last year. Strange format, but I think we made progress today, and thanks for all the good discussion. And I'll be saving this meeting. I'll be saving the chat, so I'll have all this as a record along with what transpired this morning, and then the question document. So
thanks, Ian. And just a comment from me that I preferred this format, honestly, because as somebody who totally has ADD, and I mean that literally, not as just a statement, it's so much easier for me to digest information at my own pace and use captions. Captions make everything easier for me. I watch TV with captions on, and so it was like, oh, I got so much more of what everybody presented. So I love having the recordings there for posterity as well.
No, I'm the same. I got way more out of these presentations than I ever have. Sitting in a room where we get the one after the other. This was great. Maybe this is something we'll take forward. It might be interesting to do a little poll after we're done all this to see what we think worked in this series of meetings and what didn't. So that's a good comment. I'm curious to see if everybody else found the presentations viewing a positive experience or not. Okay, great. Well, this has been good. Looking forward to our discussion next week, and in the meantime, we'll be in touch. If you have any questions, give me a shout.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Thank you, Jan. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Jan. Goodbye.